So today we're diving into a really fascinating philosophical puzzle. It involves two heavy-hitting thinkers, one iconic film, and this strange counterintuitive idea that sometimes a powerful enemy is exactly what you need to make sense of the world. Okay, let's start with an image. I want you to picture the War Room from Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove. You know the one. This place where all this official, cold-blooded rationality just spirals into pure madness. This room where they're all trying to manage a catastrophe they've already unleashed. That's going to be our anchor for everything we talk about today. All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to unpack that whole War Room idea, then see how it connects these two thinkers across a generation, each of them wrestling with their own unique kind of bomb. Now, first things first, let's get something straight. When we say the bomb, we're not talking about an actual nuclear weapon. It's a metaphor. You see, a metaphor for something that was a total catastrophe, but also, weirdly enough, a necessary point of reference. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. For the philosopher Herbert Marcuse, that bomb was Stalinism. For Slavoj Žižek, who's writing a generation later, it was the whole East Bloc system, with the Berlin Wall as its ultimate symbol. Now, both of them saw these things as horrific betrayals of the socialist dream, but their own critiques couldn't help but circle around them. They needed them as a kind of negative anchor. Okay, so let's dig into our first thinker, Herbert Marcuse, and see how he builds this case. He was writing in a world that was already dealing with the fallout from his bomb, a world that was becoming, dangerously comfortable. The timing here is absolutely critical. Marcuse is writing after that terrifying revolutionary fire of Stalinism has cooled way down. The Soviet Union is settling into something much more bureaucratic, much more manageable, and, it's starting to look a whole lot like its opposed rival in the West. And he argued that this new kind of society, both capitalist and communist, was creating what he called a one-dimensional man. By constantly feeding us false needs through mass media and consumer goods, it just flattens our ability to even imagine a different way of living. That critical gap between what the world is and what it could be just starts to shrink and disappear. So for Marcuse, this was the system's greatest trick. It makes you feel free while you're actually stuck in a cage. It keeps us just satisfied enough, just comfortable enough, that we lose that consciousness of servitude. Real freedom, real liberation starts to feel like it's not even necessary. But here's the real twist in his argument. Underneath it all, Marcuse is actually mourning a loss. As the Soviet Union becomes just another big industrial power, that stark, radical alternative to capitalism, what he called the dream against, it just vanished. The enemy was still there, sure, but it didn't represent a fundamentally different future anymore. Okay, fast forward a generation, and another bomb gets dismantled. Now we've got Slavoj Žižek, writing right after the fall of the Berlin Wall. He's in a world that's patting itself on the back, thinking it's dodged the bullet for good, and that liberal democracy is the end of history. Žižek argues we're now living in what he calls a plague of fantasies, all served up to us on screens. But, and this is a huge but, he makes a crucial distinction. The movies we watch, the media we consume, that's a false screen. It's just a pale imitation of the real screen, which for him was the Berlin Wall and the entire concrete reality of the East Bloc. See, the wall wasn't just a wall. It was a fantasy object made terrifyingly real. It organized the entire globe into two competing teams. It gave critics a giant concrete target to shoot at, and it gave dreamers a clear, even if deeply flawed, alternative to desire. It made the whole grand ideological struggle something you could actually see and touch. This story, it just perfectly captures what Žižek is getting at. Bukharin dies believing his sacrifice has meaning because it serves the grand Soviet project. But decades later, when his wife finally gets the letter, that project is gone. The whole symbolic system that guaranteed his sacrifice meant something has collapsed. It's the same thing that happened to the communist ideal itself when the wall came down. So you see where this is going, right? Even though they're separated by decades and these massive historical shifts, both Marcuse and Žižek end up in a very similar, very uncomfortable place, a world where the main enemy has just evaporated, leaving their own critiques feeling kind of anchorless and unmoored. This table kind of lays it all out side by side. You can see how their arguments are run on these parallel tracks. Both kick off by critiquing a problem of their time, a society of cozy comfort or a culture of shallow images. But both arguments end up revealing this deeper sadness, this melancholy over losing a big, world-defining enemy that gave their work its shape and its urgency. And this brings us to the final, really mind-bending twist, and the real meaning of our title. Now, neither of these thinkers loved these oppressive systems. Of course not. Far from it. But their theories just couldn't quite let them go. So get this. Here's the powerful flip. Marcuse's ultimate frustration isn't just that society is one-dimensional. It's that people aren't one-dimensional enough in their refusal. They don't say no with enough absolute, stubborn force. And Žižek's complaint isn't just that we have fantasies. It's that our modern fantasies are too weak, too ironic. They don't plague us enough to make us willing to bet everything on a cause. So they absolutely hate the bomb, but they also kind of need it. Stalinism and the Berlin Wall are these ghosts that haunt their work. They're the necessary reference points that give their critique its power and its sense of tragedy, even long after they're gone. They're reminders of a time when another world, no matter how terrifying, at least seemed possible. And that leaves us with a really provocative and frankly a really tough question for today. In a world without a clear enemy, without a dream against, how do we even start to think about a truly different future? If critique needs that big opponent to push against, what on earth is its purpose now? Thanks for throwing this explainer.